usual suspects. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's 2 minutes to the top of the hour, so we are incredibly late for tonight's broadcast. Not because out of my own making, but because of I don't know. I won't call it internal sabotage, but I'll say I'll leave it at two matters beyond my own control. Sometimes things just do not happen your way or as you had hoped they would go. But anyways, we are here once again to discuss the latest from the world of football. Good evening, GFT. Almost good morning. It's almost getting to a Monday, and you know that's the funny thing when I do this broadcast after midnight or when it's midnight, is that I then have a couple of hours to morning broadcast, which I do at 9 a.m. East African time. So I should have come here an hour earlier, But like I keep saying, it's due to matters beyond my own control. But I hope you guys are doing okay. I hope you've had a wonderful Sunday. I hope you've had a wonderful weekend, one that has been characterized by the climax of a lot of league football. I've not even been able to watch that game between Villarreal and Atletico de Madrid that was on tonight. In as far as the wrap up for the Spanish La Liga was concerned, then there's a game between Juventus and Torino as we speak. But that game, Villarreal put 5 past Atletico de Madrid to cement their place or their finish in third place, contrary to perhaps what Atletico de Madrid would have hoped in terms of a finish. So it is what it is. So tonight we'll be basically talking about the climax of the season and some of the talking points from that climax of the season, because there are things that have happened that are worth talking about, the remarkable things that have happened that we cannot let sleep. Obviously, the funny thing about media or special days in terms of the media is that no matter how many headlines you get or topics worthy of a headline, it's always one or two that will make it to the front page. And this time around, the case is the same for us. Anyways, was just having our audios tested just to make sure everything checks out really well. So even for me, the case is not any different tonight because, like I said, it's been the climax of some league football. We did have the English Premier League climax tonight. Rebellion VAR says hello to you too, Rebellion. Where are you joining us from? So, and then you have the Spanish La Liga. Majority of those games were played yesterday, and only one game today, like I highlighted. Then yesterday you had the DFB Pokal, but today you had a wrap-up of the story of Pep Guardiola as to the helm of Manchester City. They may have lost on the final day of the season, but that does not make him any less of a man than he is incredibly. I saw Mark Goldbridge trying to nitpick on that loss and saying that there's no way Sir Alex Ferguson would have lost on the final day of the season. And there I was thinking to myself, really, what? I mean, I call it pettiness. I understand the bit of rivalry there is between Manchester United and Manchester City as neighbors, but that was petty because sometimes I feel some things transcend football. Some things give us moments that we long yearn to have, and in a way, we must respect them for what they are in their greatness, without sort of having the banter of it or trying to nitpick. So I thought that was something I could pick on. Rebellion said, I subbed, by the way. Thank you so much, Rebellion. Much appreciated. GFT says, opinion on Manchester City, 115 charges. They are cheats. GFT, you say, I do not rate Pep because Manchester City cheated. Didn't Saints cheat? I don't know. What do you mean, Saints? You mean Southampton? They were eliminated, if that is what you mean. John Abiero, it's been quite a while since I last seen you here, but I hope you've been all right. Good to have you back. Mark Goldbridge is a wanker. Now, Let me first wrap up with Mark Goldbridge. Like I said, after 10 years at the helm of Manchester City, today was the final day Pep Guardiola guided his team out there on the turf. And it was supposed to be an enjoyable game. It's okay, GFT. It's okay. It was supposed to be an enjoyable game. Not enjoyable in the sense of him winning or otherwise. It was supposed to be enjoyable either way. Win, lose, draw. It was supposed to be that because it's the climax of a story of a decade and perhaps a story for many, many years, you know. And I said this before without any fear of contradiction, it will be very difficult, almost close to impossible, but not impossible, but close to it, to find a manager that will be capable to replicate what Pep Guardiola has done at Manchester City. And for me, in a way, I find that, and that's where I look to say that maybe, just maybe, for the respect of the moment, for the respect of the competition, and I know even at the stages where you have the greatest of rivalry, whether it's in world politics or otherwise, there will come that moment in history, there'll come that point in life where a certain respect is owed to accorded or to accommodated on either side, whether it's out of courtesy or just the definition of the moment in itself. So, Leoma Martin says, it's me. Martins, hi Martins. Good to have you on the channel. When you say it's me, I do not know what you mean exactly, but I'll take you for Martins. Who cares what Mark Goldbridge thinks? Now, it's not that I care what he thinks, it's because he has a reasonable audience. And in that reasonable audience, sometimes we ought to galvanize people. We ought to put the rivalry aside. So it was a tweet that I read during the course of the game, and I thought it was just petty. I mean, let it slide. Sometimes it doesn't hurt if you do not say it. It doesn't hurt, you know? So anyways, so the story here is with Pep Guardiola, not with what Mark Goldbridge said, by the way. That's not the story. The story is Pep Guardiola bidding farewell to Manchester City after 10 years. We've already discussed at great length in highlight of what he's won. 20 major trophies. And I do not think that there is a single season he's walked away with Manchester City fans thinking that, yeah, he's sort of hit his greatest heights. He cannot go beyond that. I, for one, I still feel up to today that if the page were flipped to tomorrow and he decided to say, no, I'm canceling my, stepping down and I'll stay on, he would still be capable of doing great things. That's the caliber of the man we're talking about. So only in those 10 years, only in 2 seasons has he ended a season without a major piece of silverware. So, that's that. And that's his debut campaign 2016, 2017, and then last season 2024, 2025. Remarkable of the man himself. So it's really, really tremendous what he's managed to achieve. Now, unfortunately for the man, is that at the tail end of this chapter or this story has come the charges that GFT highlights to say, how about the 115 charges that seem to sort of taint a dark shade on his reputation and that of the club or the institution that he represented. It's not to say that Man City were perfect or are innocent. It's simply to say that sometimes we have collateral damage. I'll give you an example. And this I'll say at the basis of family. If you have a family, let's say of 4 or 5 people, husband and wife and children, your kid may go out there and do something that brings disrepute to the club, to the family. In other words, you're not aware of what they've done, but that they've done brings the family into disrepute or causes shame to the family. So everything Manchester City did, Pep Guardiola as manager, some of them may have been above his pay grade, or he may have not been in the know of them. And yet, when that sort of shame or dark shade over the club's reputation comes, he is also part of the story and therefore a culprit in a way. But in the story of collateral damage. So the 115 charges are still there. The other day we were doing the broadcast here with you guys, and somebody asked the question: now that Pep Guardiola is leaving, are we finally going to get a verdict for those 115 charges? I think it was Viola who asked the question. Greetings to you, Viola, by the way. And I said this. I think it was last night, or I think last night or Saturday morning, thereabouts. And I said, at the start of the season, he himself, Pep Guardiola, had said the verdict would come out in 1 month. 9 months later, we do not have anything. 8 months later, we do not have anything for a verdict. What's happened between there, you and I can only guess. However, I know that the case or the matters of the 115 charges, possibly even more, have been handled in such a discreet manner, as is the nature of many legal proceedings when it comes to English laws and, sometimes a handling of things. I'll give you an example. During the case, during the time when Thomas Partey was still under investigation, and before his matters were taken before court, journalists were not allowed to name the player. They were not allowed to put his name out there in the public. It would contravene some laws within the country. So, but just to digress back to Manchester City, is that even in the handling of those 115 charges, we know for a fact that a large chunk of the work has been done. So much to the extent that at some point we had, reports suggesting that a verdict had been reached upon, But nonetheless, it's not yet come out. I would want to think that maybe they're trying to go through this with a fine-tooth comb, to make sure they get to the best possible outcome without any fears of contradiction. But also, more importantly, I know for a fact that justice delayed is justice denied in a way. So you also have that story, or that sort of narrative where you think, if it is true that they committed all these offenses, the longer it takes to have that conviction is the more you deny other teams justice in terms of the penalties they would expect for Manchester City to suffer in the wake of those indiscretions. So I cannot promise you when we will get to see the verdict, but I'll tell you for a fact that sometime it will come out. Excuse me. I, for one, am not sold on the idea or on some sort of belief that now that Pep Guardiola has left the club, then the verdict will come out quickly. I do not think that the two are interlinked. I do not think that the Premier League were hesitant to release the verdict just because Pep Guardiola is still at the club. That's not my school of thought. It's a conspiracy theory that some people will hold. So I'll leave that at that. Okay. Let me proceed with some of your questions. Okay. JFT says, do you think Chelsea are cheats? We are not as big of cheats as Manchester City. Do I think Chelsea are cheats? I don't know if cheats is the right word to use, but yeah, Chelsea have been found culpable of flouting the rules. And we know the verdict that has come henceforth, including that £10 million, penalty, plus, it's actually £10 million and £750,000 for the penalty. And as far as the Premier League is concerned, and €10 million for the UEFA for all their financial indiscretions when it came to paying agents, and those payments were not recorded as such. So, and I remember at the time when we were having that discussion, we said, come on, is it just going to end? Should it just end at that? Because their indiscretions gave them a competitive advantage over the other teams, and it came in the wake of when we had just gone through an episode of Everton being deducted points twice, as well as Nottingham Forest suffering a similar consequence for their financial indiscretions in the form of flouting the profit and sustainability rules of the Premier League. So there was a school of thought or a class of football enthusiasts who thought that Chelsea should have paid with the ultimate penalty. Some people were of the view, strip them of major titles that they've won during that period, because it is those indiscretions that then gave them the competitive advantage. Would I want to think the same? I do not think I would be against it if that would have been the verdict. Nonetheless, I would still say it is too harsh. Like I said, in the story of indiscretions or flouting rules and things like that, oftentimes you have collateral damage. From the revelations of Tony Boli and his partners, what it indicated is that the club had been brought in disrepute. But I'd want to think senior figures at the club had made these choices, and obviously you get the penalties as the institution, but not as the people that did them. And maybe sometimes that's where I feel burdened by, because we're talking about people that know the rules, people that know the rules, and yet somehow they decide to sort of, flout them at the expense of institutions. Ahmed Kad, is it Ahmed Kad? Is that how you pronounce the name? From Takia says, Takia is a favorite team. Okay. All right. Let me retreat back to some of these comments. Rebellion said, didn't Southampton spy on Middlesbrough? They did. And that's what got them kicked out of the competition. And that's the sort of narrative that people, or the expectation that people may have on these other teams that have flouted the rules, that it should be the ultimate penalty. That's where the conversation with Chelsea relates to, and by extension, that of Manchester City, that should they be found guilty, maybe in some of those title-winning seasons, they should be stripped of their accolades. Remember when you, but for the Juventus, maybe the scenarios were a bit different, but they got stripped one of their Scudettos for their, inappropriateness in terms of how they went about certain things. So there's that. So Southampton were found guilty of spying on 3 teams, not just one. It is Middlesbrough was simply the last stroke. That was the last stroke that broke the camel's back. But during the investigation, they admitted to spying on 2 other teams. In Oxford United, that was in December. Then they spied on Ipswich Town in April, and then Middlesbrough in May. So eventually, the conclusion was that they should be penalized. And from what I gather, the FA are looking to take action on some officials who they may think or individuals that were involved in this scandal. So for bringing the game into disrepute. For the players, they suffered the consequences of actions that were not of their own. In other words, there were collateral damage in this story. They themselves as a team or as a group of players had played to deserve to be in the championship playoffs. Unfortunately, their minders flouted the rules to give them that competitive advantage, and therefore they get to suffer the consequences of the crimes of their masters. So that's the unfortunate bit of it. John Obiero says, is there any awards for Arsenal FC being the first to finish the league with 0 red card, considered 0 a penalty? Now, I think ordinarily, I do not know of any Premier League award that would come to a team that has behaved in such a manner. They've been by far the most disciplined team of the campaign. I think they would get an award which is ordinarily called the Fair Play Award. And that's most disciplined team. We've heard of these sort of awards at tournaments like the World Cup and etc. I remember at one time, I think Japan won it simply because, in conjunction with having very disciplined group of fans and etc. So I would want to think maybe at the PFA Awards, that is the Professional Footballers Association Awards, maybe they would get that recognition, and that time when we get to hear PFA Team of the Year, blah, 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 PFA Young Player of the Year, PFA Player of the Year, things like that. That's where I would want to think it will come in. Hi, Abdul Wahid. Good to have you, my brother. Good to have you back on the broadcast. So that's what I would want to think. But yeah, you're right. Arsenal have been the most disciplined team throughout the campaign. They've had 51 yellow cards, no penalties conceded, no red cards. So In a way, you could say in some cases they were lucky to get away with certain actions that would have culminated into a red card. Particularly, go back to that incident involving Burnley for the sort of tackle from behind from Kai Havertz. Then you also go back to that head push by Gabriel Magalhaes against Brad Erling Haaland. You never know that sort of incident. And then there was another sort of snafu moment involving Gabriel Martinelli against Brighton in their 1-0 victory at the Amex Stadium. So you could reflect on some of those, on some of those moments to say they were lucky to get away with it. But in a nutshell, or conclusively, it is without a doubt that they've been arguably the best team and most disciplined side in as far as things have gone. Okay, then Abdul Wahid said hi. Okay, Rebellion said also Hull City won yesterday and got promoted to the Premier League. That's true. You see, that's the thing that I say. Sometimes you have a lot of good news that some news gets by under the radar. And for a game that big, meanwhile, Juventus are leading Torino by 2-1. Juventus need to win that game, I think, to guarantee, I think, their place in the Champions League places. Gradao games are good to have you back. Never forget Diego Jota. Of course, he cannot be forgotten. But yeah, it is true that Hull City joined Ipswich Town and Coventry City as the 3 promoted teams from the championship to come to the Premier League. And it's tremendous for Hull City. An incredible achievement, comes with a great deal of financial resources and things like that. Now, the task will, of course, focus on next season to ensure that they do not get dropped, to ensure that it's teams that have constantly been flirting with relegation that get dropped other than them. So, this season, we've confirmed West Ham, Burnley, and Wolverhampton Wanderers. I don't think, as unfortunate as it may sound for West Ham, they got what they deserved. They got what they deserved entirely. Sorry for my bad English. What bad English? You simply said never forget Diego Jota. I do not think there's any bad English in that. Okay. John said 0 red cards and 0 penalty conceded. That's true. Abdul, you said Mo Salah's last match for Liverpool. Yeah, it did not end in the perfect outcome. Liverpool would have loved to win the game, but they had to settle for a 1-1 draw. It is what it is. He gets to live as a legend. So goes with Andy Robertson. 2 legends depart the club at a time when they've already bid farewell to so many others that came before or after them in the wake of players that helped Liverpool achieve those great heights, including winning the Premier League title in 2020 after having won the UEFA Champions League in 2019, So you have that bit. And it's really, really incredible. It's really, really incredible story. Now, out of that class of players that included Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, Jordan Henderson, Arsenal Ramsey-Becker, Fabinho, Gini Wijnaldum, Naby Keita, Sadio Mane, Roberto Firmino, Joe Gomez, Andy Robertson, Alexander Trent-Arnold, name it all. I think Mo Salah rose above all of them in terms of his status with the club and his overall contribution to their incredible story. 30 years without a Premier League title. They beat that one in 2020. Then Champions League, which they had not won since 2005. They won it in 2020. After 15 years? Then you had the story of last season winning the Premier League title. Last season winning the Premier League title under Arne Slot. I mean, that was the icing on the cake. So he walks out with his head high, although with a bit of an individual disappointment, understanding, having been part of that dressing room, of how he feels that the club is digressing in terms of its culture and tradition and how they play the game. So that's the only reservation, maybe. But really, really great guys. Oh, thank you so much, Abdul Wahid, for the cup of coffee. But for me, I said this, and I do not know whether Abdul, you'll share similar sentiments. But for me, I say that um, Mo Salah could arguably be the greatest African player to play in the Premier League. Now, obviously, we've seen so many tremendous players that have sort of come there and sort of graced the turf. The likes of Yaya Toure, Koro Toure, Roland Maya, Yako Ascavino, in no particular order. Didier Drogba, Yves Debire, John Obi Mikel, Augustin Okocha at Bolton, Obafemi Martins at Newcastle, Yakubu Ayegebini at Everton. The late Ismail Chak Tiote with Newcastle, Papisi Dembaba, Papisi Demba Cisse. In terms of, they may not have won much, but at least they left a mark or two on the Premier League. It's unfortunate that you're leaving us this early, Abdul, but much appreciated for always rendering us your time. But more importantly, the cup of coffee. Really, really. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And may Allah reward you where you've taken out of from your pocket. So you've had so many great players walk through the Premier League. Some great, some just good, some brilliant, others of legendary status. So those with legendary status are the, Didier Drogba's, the Kolo Tourés, the Mo Salahs, etc., etc., depending on how you enlist them. But I think Mo Salah, based on what he's achieved, he's right up there. He's at the top of that food chain, in my humble opinion. I think winning 4 Golden Boots 3 times, named the PFA Player of the Year, So you look at all that and can't help it but wonder or thank for having been there, watching him succeed or thrive. During the course of the last 9 years when he's been at Anfield. Obviously, this season has not been the kind of season he would have loved it to go down with in terms of his overall performances. But we're talking about a player who won PFA Award of Player of the Year last year. He won it last year, and when you go back to what's the other year? What year was that? I'm trying to remember. Because for as far as the Golden Boot is concerned, he's won that one multiple times, 4 times. And he stands as one of the greatest. So basically, you have him, yes, last year, then you go back to 2022, you go back to 2018. He's won it 3 times. Really, really incredible. Obviously, there are others that have won it multiple times. I think Kareken should be one of them. Even Kevin De Bruyne is one of them that have won it at least more than once. But you see, it stands to speak to his greatness in as far as Liverpool and Premier League history is concerned. Really, really, really incredible. Really, really incredible. And quite very deserved. This year, we are still waiting to find out who that player will be. But Mohamed Salah is the reigning champion. And he did it in 2022 and also in 2018. So 3 times being voted the PFA Player of the Year. So I do not think there's a single African player that managed to win that. Did Didier Drogba ever win it? Not that I remember. Because during that time, when you would have expected him to win, it was the likes of Cristiano Ronaldo, Steven Gerrard that were winning. Gareth Bale, Wayne Rooney, and maybe Maybe he would have deserved it in 2010, but it was given to Wayne Rooney. So it is what it is. Anyways, so that's the incredible story of Mo Salah. And like I said, you remember when I said, when you have a day with so many, with a lot of news worthy of headlines, there's always going to be that piece that rises up to the top. And even in the wake of Liverpool's news, Ches, man of culture, says Mane Mahrez. Yeah, thank you so much for the addition. Mahrez, yeah, is right up there. So even in the story of Liverpool, where it was the final day of the season at Anfield, and for the last time, Mo Salah went to his knees and kissed the Anfield turf. On the same day, you had Andy Robertson. They've won the same pieces of silverware for the club. But when it comes to individual accolades, that's what puts Mo Salah above Andy Robertson. And so, therefore, it sort of feels like Andy Robertson is a footnote to the story that was at Anfield. And yet, he deserves to be just right up there. So, he's not just a footnote. He's the subtitle to the headline of Mohamed Salah bidding farewell to Anfield. So, Andy Robertson, really, I mean, congratulations, mate. I do not know where their next destinations will be. I, for one, would have loved to see more Salah, a little bit more in the Premier League, at maybe a mid-table team where the pressure of winning titles and etc., where he can go and be the king of the hill and that sort of thing. Andy Robertson, Tottenham Hotspurs were interested. Whether they will continue to pursue that remains to be seen. But at one point, even Atletico de Madrid was said to have interest in now the free agent Scottish international. So we'll have to wait and see. Anyways, moving away from that, today, 10 games were played at 6 p.m. East African time in as far as the Premier League match day 38 was concerned. So many disappointing results. I do not know where to start from. But there's one story that was second best on the day. Like I said, there's so many big stories. And just to give you a highlight, West Ham United got relegated after Tottenham Hotspur beat up against Everton by a goal to nil, despite West Ham winning 3-0 against Leeds United. The other story was Chelsea got beat. Yeah, you had that right. Chelsea got beat. And in getting beat, the funny thing is that they didn't just get beat. Once they got beat, they finished the game with the madness. But that's not the story. In getting beat, they ended up finishing 10th on the Premier League log. And Sunderland, a newly promoted side, achieved UEFA Europa League football. Now, in my head, I've been going through the Premier League awards of the season. And perhaps if I find the time, I'll do this as an exclusive video. But Sunderland will be my team of the year. Keith Andrews, I already voted him as my head coach of the year. But somehow, I've been racing in my mind on where to place Andoni Iraola. I think if there was a consolation prize, he would take it, in my humble opinion, for the honorable mention. For those of you that follow the smartphone awards that are often done by Mr. Who is the Boss and MKBHD, you must be familiar that there are those awards of what you could pass for the honorable mentions. So maybe then, and I hope I forget not to do this in terms of my Premier League awards, you know. So Sunderland are really up there, you know, and Keith Andrews, for me, is the manager of the season. And then Andoni Iraola deserves an honorable mention. Now, on the day, so those were key stories. So you have the story of Chelsea getting beat and finishing 10th. We're talking about the world champions. They won the FIFA Club World Cup, beating PSG. You've had Pep Guardiola leave or sign out officially. And that's to say, he lost on the final day against Aston Villa, who, by the way, cemented their status in 4th place. Then on the same day, you had West Ham getting relegated, you know, and then Tottenham Hotspur surviving relegation. So those are all major stories. But of course, the biggest story was Arsenal being crowned champions. That's the biggest story of the day. That's the headlines. That's all over the cover pages of the news. But there were so many. So, in those so many stories, I think, I do not know where you will place this one, but Bruno Fernandes broke the record for most assists in a single Premier League season. He provided the assist, which was, I think, through a corner kick, as Patrick Dogu scored to make it, to give Manchester United a 1-0 lead during their trip to the Amex Stadium. And he went on to put the icing on the cake when he scored in the 48th minute the goal that was his 9th of the campaign. So there's just been so many stories, some worth of writing, others for the history books. In other words, you do not just write them, have them read and pass them away on, but for the history books. And Bruno Fernandes voted Football Writers Association Player of the Year, and then also recently voted EA Sports Player of the Year, or the Premier League Player of the Season. Now, guys, there's 3 accolades in this particular case. You have the Football Writers Association Award, which is sort of similar to the BBC Player of the Year Award. You have the Premier League Player of the Season, and then you have the PFA Player of the Year, which is the Professional Football Associations, that sort of award, where you have that. Bruno Fernandes or Prime KDB? Prime KDB any day. I'll take Prime KDB any day. Oh my God. KDB just had something sublime on his foot. And that's not to disrespect Bruno Fernandes and what is achieved. When you look at Bruno Fernandes and what he's been able to achieve with Manchester United, it's remarkable. Ever since, when you go back to his debut campaign, I think he arrived somewhere in, was it 2020? He arrived in January during Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's tenure, and ever since then, he's been arguably one of the most consistent players. Now, in his first half season, he scored 8 goals and provided 7 assists. That was a 15-goal contribution. And everybody was wondering, what's this kid been all along? Manchester City had tried to sign him years earlier, but failed. Then, the subsequent, or his first full season, which is 2020-2021. And I think that's the season in which Manchester United finished second behind Manchester City as the eventual champions of the Premier League that season. He scored 18 goals and provided 12 assists. That's incredible. Really, really incredible. So you can see that sort of level of consistency. Now, the subsequent season, 2021-2022, is where he had a bit of a drop-off with 10 goals and 16 assists. But those are still good numbers for a player playing his role. Then the subsequent season, 2022-2023, he had another slight bit of a drop-off, not in overall numbers, but in terms of goal contribution, in terms of goals, because he had 8 goals and 8 assists, still 16. But again, it is relative consistency, So then you go back to, I think you go to the 2023-2024 season. He scored for you 10 goals and provided 8 assists. That's another incredible contribution. And then last season, 10 assists, 8 goals, and 18 goal involvement. So there's not a single season where his goal involvement has been below double figures. Not a single one. And this season, he has a 29, he actually has a 30 goal involvement. 9 goals, 21 assists, regardless of whether it was set from set pieces or open play, that nonsense, that narrative. So he set a new record for most assists in a single Premier League season. And I was having a conversation with somebody, and he thinks that he could actually beat the same record next season. Is he capable? Absolutely. In fact, his assists would have been more this season had some people been clinical finishers. I take myself back to that game against, was it Nottingham Forest? And Brandon Mbeumo missed lots of chances. And some of those chances had been created by Bruno Fernandes, you know. So he's been really, really incredible. He's done tremendously well this season, really, tremendously well. So he's also another headline of its aspect. That's why I said the headline today was Arsenal being crowned champions. Somewhere in there, you have Pep Guardiola with his bidding his farewell. He had his farewell speech at the Etihad Stadium. Then you have the Bruno Fernandes story. Then you have the Chelsea story. You have the Tottenham story. You have the West Ham story. So many stories. But more importantly, you have the Sunderland story, qualifying for European football. But as you speak of Sunderland, you also remember that FC Bournemouth are in the same boat. They've also qualified for European football. So there's so many incredible stories, including Brighton and Hove Albion. Brentford fell short by a single point. So as you reflect on it all through and through, you ought to remember that. You ought to remember that. There's so many incredible stories. One that if I were a writer and if I had the luxury of time, because unfortunately news does not give you much in terms of the luxury of time, but for me, I'd be writing one story every single day for the next 10 days. And I'll be bringing you a unique story in as far as the Premier League season is concerned. From the winners, from Manchester United's resurgence after the firing of Ruben Amorim, to Chelsea's collapse, Liverpool's poor season, Newcastle in there have their own story. You have the story of Crystal Palace, who reached the finals of the UEFA Conference League, but also their manager is departing at the end of the season. That is Oliver Glasner. You have the Bournemouth story. You have Brighton and Hove Albion. You have Brentford. You have Sunderland. So many stories. You have the Bruno Fernandes story. So many stories to write. Unfortunately, I'm no longer a sports news writer, so I will not be putting those stories on paper, or I'll not be putting pen to paper or inking down those stories, but I'll simply verbatimly tell those stories, bit by bit, to the best of my ability. And that's what I'm doing right now. So it's really, really massive. So Blackdown Games, as much as I love Bruno Fernandes, I would choose KDB. I'd choose KDB. But all have, like, you feel that everything KDB can do, Bruno Fernandes can do. Whether it's a dead ball situation, whether it's striking the ball from distance, whether it's a long pass, whether it's a short pass, whether it's a through ball, whether it's a pinpoint pass, they can all do that. However, a part of me feels that the certain level of execution and the beauty in that execution lies with KDB. And that's why I tilt towards him. You say, is Salah the biggest player of the recent Liverpool era? Without a doubt. Without a doubt. He is right absolutely there. I mean, 9 seasons. Mohamed Salah was simply exceptional. Exceptional. So that is a story of its own as well. Anyways, so new Premier League record set, and it's incredible. Maybe the one thing that, however, and I did not want it to be me to put myself in that place to even mention this. But unfortunately, if I don't, somebody else may not. Congratulations, LFC fan. That is Wayne Ferreira. Is that how you? No, it's not Ferreira. It's Wayne. Allow me only pronounce it as Wayne, so that I do not bite my tongue trying to pronounce the other. Okay. Manchester United fans have celebrated Bruno Fernandes, and deservedly so. But from in the country where I sit, They've almost celebrated it like it's a trophy of its own. And this is subject to interpretation based on how you see it. Someone will tell you that's how low they've sunk in terms of expectations and aspirations for the team. That's why I started by saying they deserve to celebrate Bruno Fernandes for the achievement he's done. But in no aspect should it feel like the substitution of the title. You know? Since when do we compare individual player achievements to the idea of a collective team achievement? And by the way, anyway, I'll leave that at that. It is for you guys to digest. It is strictly for you guys to digest, to say, this is where we look at things. This is how things should go, you know? Anyways, so that's about it. That's that as well. Now, let's go to the biggest story of the day, you know? Let's go to the biggest story of the day. Arsenal were crowned champions at Selhurst Park. Now, somebody in the course of that whole party, or that whole event, said words that perfectly resonated with me. And this was Josh Koronke, one of the senior executives at the club, son of the owner, Stan Kroenke. He was being asked by, I think, is it an NBC reporter or TNT or something? They asked him a question that somebody said, I saw you walk while lifting that title, because he came out carrying it with his father. And he sort of had, it's like a moment of self-realization. And so the reporter, this pundit, was trying to ask him what he was thinking in that moment. Where was he in that headspace at that moment? And he said something profound. He said, when you achieve something, it takes you back to certain moments in the journey. And for me, that is perfectly put. I do associate myself with those exact words. Welsh. I'm trying to read your name the perfect way I can. Unlucky West Ham, unlucky indeed, but I think they just did not create their own luck this season round. Congratulations on the league. Thank you so much. Now, a lot of people, okay, not a lot of people, some cynical people have tried to criticize Arsenal or Arsenal fans for over-celebrating this. But particularly, it's to be expected because it comes from rival fans. When you follow some of the online conversation, and they just cannot stand maybe Arsenal winning. Maybe that's what happens with rivals. But I've never found myself in that sort of space where I feel the need to attack my opponent just because they won. You know, I've never been one to play that card. Well-deserved title. Everyone else hasn't been up to the standard. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Welsh. I don't know if your name is Welsh or Well, or I should just call you by the last word of it. Boy, you can help me there. But I was reflecting on it and trying to understand where Arsenal are celebrating all this through. And then when Josh Koronke said that when you achieve something, it takes you back to the journey. Tractor boy, okay. Oh, so it's Welsh tractor boy. We'll see you next season. All right, okay. Now, but don't sign out just yet. Kindly like the broadcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. Now, this is what I was saying. When he says those words, as an Arsenal fan, it took me back to so many places. But more importantly, it took those players back to so many moments in their own celebrations. There's a timing point, and Arsenal have captured this on their social media. You can go and check out the photo. There's that photo that Daniel Berry's Sport says, "Hey all, happy Sunday to you too." There's that photo that Bukayo Saka posted. I think it was around the period of 2020, and he said, "Arsenal fans, you deserve better." Mr. Bot Bro says, "Glory, glory, Manchester United, glory, glory." Good to have you, Mr. Bot. So, yes, that photo, he shared it, I think, sometime, or he shared it on December 16th, 2020. And he said, "You deserve more, Arsenal fans." And now they recreated the same moment with a little bit of a different posture, because that time he had his head sort of facing the turf, in between his legs facing the turf. This time around, he's staring sideways to the camera with the Premier League trophy in between his legs. So now, that's one of the perfect examples that I can use to say, when you achieve something big, it takes you back to certain moments. The other day, I told a personal story here on the broadcast. But before I revisit that personal story, let me read some of your comments, because I see Reluctant Gamers also joined us here. Rio Dandy is also around. Good to have you all guys back. Okay. Hey, brother. Hey, Reluctant Gamer. You can still get the Champions League too. Jesus Christ. That would be tremendous. That would be tremendous, really. I would win one Premier League rather than 3 La Ligas. That's Rio Dandy. Well, that's your personal opinion, but thank you so much, Rio Dandy. Now, the other day I shared my personal story, and for me, hi Ash, good to have you back on the broadcast. Says, "Hey, job done." Yeah, job done indeed. Congratulations to you. Ash is a Tottenham Hotspur fan. Now, allow me to reflect a little bit back on my personal story. Watching sound is gone out. Yep. Allow me have a swap of microphones. I do not know why, but one of my microphones is not charging as it should. Anyways, so I was having that personal story, and I remember growing up, access to football matches, I wouldn't say was even limited. It just wasn't there. It just wasn't there. So now I settled to, or resorted to, following the game on radio. And you know how radio commentary can be. With radio commentary, you're not watching anything. You're simply listening into somebody literally narrating you bit by bit what is happening on the other side of the screen, you know? So, but it took me back to 2005 and then 2006, because those are the most memorable moments when the radio station at the tail end of the season would play that song, "Stand Up for the Champions." And on those 2 occasions, Chelsea had won the league title. Chelsea, of course, Frank Lampard having a very tremendous season. When you go back to the 2024-2025 season, I think he was PFA Player of the Year. During that spell or that campaign, he was voted that, you know. So yeah, no, it was John Terry that was given PFA Player of the Year. But I think Frank Lampard had a tremendous season. He scored, was it 18 goals? Lampard. But the point I'm trying to drive at is where my history with the game is at, or comes in, or to fit into this story, is that they'll play that song of "Stand Up for the Champions," and I knew my team were not the champions. So, because I had zero memory of listening to the same moment when Arsenal were winning it in 2004, the unbeaten one season. I'd started to follow the game, but not intently. But this time around, I was being intentional in trying to listen into all matches whenever I could, and because access to radio was also not given, it was just once every now and then my folks then would sort of tell you, oh, there's a game on, come and listen in. And then you go and sit and listen. So Frank Lampard scored 13 goals and 18 assists. So they played that song. And so I have those two vivid memories of me tuning into the radio for 2 consecutive seasons and Chelsea were champions. Now, I had nothing against Chelsea, but I had a nephew who was supporting Chelsea at the time, and I remember him being the happiest. Of course, he was a bit younger than I. So for many, many years, I longed to listen to that play out. I long to listen to that song play out when it's Arsenal that have won the Premier League title. Stand up for the champions. And this season has, that time or that point has eventually come. So the celebrations or the achievement of something takes you back to many moments in the journey. So there's so many other moments that I cannot take you through because it could almost take an hour if I decided to take you through every particular moment of it. But that's just the snippet of it. So Joshua Kroenke was really, really spot on with those words. But let me read some of your comments. Okay. Okay. Real Dandy, you say, I feel the Premier League is very hard and much more versatile than La Liga. Getting unexpected winners, losses, anything can happen. But in La Liga, for almost 20 years, only 3 clubs are winning it. And also add, okay, in those 20 years, one of the 3 clubs has won it twice. All the other times have been predominantly Barcelona and then Real Madrid. So, and that sort of school of argument or sort of line of perception is where I stood to say that the Premier League is the most competitive league out of the top 5 leagues in Europe. So, and I remember making my argument. So I do not want to repeat myself on that argument. Okay, Mr. Devo says, yo, I'm an FC Bournemouth fan. Am I allowed in this stream? You're completely allowed, Mr. Devo. Even though I do not know how you arrived at choosing the name, Mr. Devo, VRFS. I do not know how you arrived at that, but you're most welcome to the channel and the stream. Kindly like the broadcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel. In case you're wondering, my name is Robert K. Sarkos. So, and congratulations to you upon achieving European football. And I'll be hoping to hear your statements about the departure of Andoni Iraola, because his job at FC Bournemouth is done. And now you have to look forward to Marco Rose, who at this stage is an unknown quantity in respect to FC Bournemouth. Are you going to miss Andoni Iraola? Why do you place him in Bournemouth history? Because what he's achieved over the years has been tremendous. So, okay, I'm moving on. Yes, Mr. Devo, 100%. Oh, thank you so much, Reluctant Gamer, for helping me respond in time before I could read the comments. And then he said, thanks. Lash Gush says, I like the shirt better. I like the shirt better would be red. Oh, red. Unfortunately, I cannot wear red every day. Maybe tomorrow or in the course of this week, I'll come in the yellow one. Maybe when we're doing the preview for the UEFA Champions League final. Anyways, but thank you so much, Lash Kush. Ash says this is 2022-2023 away shirt, right? Yeah, that's it. It is the one. It is the one. By the way, I've not been able to afford myself an Arsenal kit for the last 2 seasons, and it's not like no. Actually, last season but one, I bought a kit, but it was just poor. It just felt poor. Yes, I know we do not buy the original versions, but it was not the right kit. Even the design was a bit different. So I ended up giving it away. I just dreaded it. So, but this season I've not been able to afford myself a kit. I do not know if next season I will be able. If anybody can donate me some, how much would it be? About 10 to 12 US dollars. be happy to welcome it to acquire myself a kit next season. Anyways, jokes that aside, it's not the gist of this conversation. But yeah, it is the away kit. Mr. Devo says you FC Bournemouth, reluctant gamer? No, he's a Newcastle fan. Reluctant gamer is a Newcastle fan. Fan, sorry, okay, typo. Yeah, it's 2023. By the way, thank you so much for subscribing. Reluctant gamer is a Newcastle fan. You said thank you, mate. Well done. That deserves the title. Thank you so much. Real Dandy says, I want to ask something. If the Premier League is so competitive, then why did the most of the Premier League clubs lost their UEFA Champions League matches against La Liga teams? Now, exactly. That's something I've discussed before. Okay. Just now, the Premier League is the most competitive league as a whole across the 20 different teams. But that doesn't mean that in the Spanish La Liga, there are no teams that are bigger than some of these teams in the Premier League, if not all these teams in the Premier League. I'll give an example. Just because the Premier League is competitive or very competitive, it doesn't mean that an AFC Bournemouth is bigger than Barcelona, Real Madrid, or Atletico de Madrid, later on Villarreal, in that sort of context. So they are very competitive, but Aston Villa are no match for Real Madrid. They're no match for Barcelona. That's how Newcastle got dumped out. Just because it is the most competitive league in the world, it doesn't mean that PSG are not better than majority of those teams in the Premier League. So when you go out in those other leagues and pick out individual teams, there's a good number of teams that are better than so many Premier League teams. So that's why I say internally, the competitiveness is based on the respective internal teams, not in comparison of team per team with the other side. Because I'll not be an honest football enthusiast if I sat in this chair and I started comparing Barcelona with Newcastle, with Aston Villa, with Tottenham Hotspur. I wouldn't be honest. I wouldn't be honest if I sat in this chair and I started comparing AC Milan to Brighton. No. Inter Milan to Crystal Palace. Juventus to Everton. No, I wouldn't. So, in that sort of analogy, so you have these gigantic teams by stature, by history, by pedigree, and everything else that comes with them. Bayern Munich, Inter Milan, AC Milan, Juventus, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Atletico de Madrid. You could also even mention Valencia by the nature of their history, forget their current status and terms. Go to clubs like Ajax. I mean, Borussia Dortmund, PSG, Olympique Marseille. These are teams that, on paper, are better than a good chunk of Premier League teams. So, in that sort of analogy, I hope it makes sense, Rio Dandy. Okay, okay, you are responding to Reluctant Gamer. Mr. Devo, what team you support in the World Cup, Mister? I support Brazil. Thank you so much. And I've already supported Brazil simply because Uganda Cranes never makes it there. So, I support Brazil. We have Vic Dollar. Is it Vic Dollar or Vio Dollar? Let me try to get this one right. It's Vic Dollar. Okay, Vic Dollar says, did I miss something? Okay, are you from Kenya? I'm going to Kenya right now. No, I'm not from Kenya. I'm from Kampala, Uganda. But thank you so much. And safe journey to you as you head to Kenya. Where are you from, Vic Dollar? Then there's somebody called Manik. Hi, Manik. You say, yo, I'll support Japan. Wow, that's an interesting take, Ash. Okay, but good luck with your support and endeavor with Japan. Manik says, do you know penguins can beat sharks in boxing matches? I didn't even know that some of those water animals are capable of entertaining a boxing match, Manik says, bro, Premier League fans are too much deep in their... Okay, not the best choice of language, but I do not know what compels you to say that. I do not know what your school of argument is or where you source that from. But I'll leave it as your opinion to be as such. Okay, Mr. Devo says, yo, I'm back. Okay, good to have you back. Okay, sir. One last question. If either Barcelona or Real Madrid plays in the Premier League, let's assume, will it be the best team? Will it be the number one? It's not a given. It's not a given that they will be the best team or the number one, you know, um, because the same way Valencia, Valencia when Valencia won the Spanish La Liga in 2002 and 2004, Barcelona were still playing in the same league, and so were Real Madrid, and so were those two teams when Atletico won it in 2014 and 2021. The point I'm trying to make is that if they were to come and play the Premier League, it's not a given that they're going to win it. But the one thing that I can tell you that it's a given of is that they will be better than very many teams in the same league, you know. So winning it cannot be guaranteed, but being better than many teams, that I can guarantee on. That I can guarantee on. You know, I hope that makes sense. Okay. Mr. Devo says, Barca, yes, Madrid possibly third, but they are going against clubs like City, Arsenal, and Liverpool. Now, you see, sometimes when these clubs meet at the continental level, that's in the UEFA Champions League or the UEFA Europa League, wherever it is they meet, on the continental level, or previously, like in the FIFA Club World Cup, when Chelsea put 3 past PSG, everybody thought Chelsea were the new kid of the block, that they had arrived. But the same sides met in a doubleheader in the UEFA Champions League, and Chelsea, by the look of the squad, felt like they were no match for PSG, regardless of how the first leg went, because I thought Chelsea were really, really decent for 75 minutes, you know? So you have that. So basically, and it's the point I'm trying to make is that Barcelona are capable of beating up Liverpool, Arsenal, whichever, and vice versa during a league format. But the league is a marathon. You have to prove yourself on a stretch of 38 games. And that's what makes the difference. It's not just about, oh, I met the big boys and I beat them. So what? You know, it's just not enough to do that. So I think they would compete quite favorably well. I cannot guarantee that they would be winning it season in, season out, but they could also win it, you know? So I'll leave it at that. Okay. Ash says we would sign Senesi from Bournemouth. Oh, Senesi, is he the one going to be the free agent? Senesi? Okay, I know of him. Okay. What team do you support? Back. BC? What team do you support, BC? I'm an FC Bournemouth fan. Who is BC? I did not get that one clearly, Mr. Devo. Somebody thanks for your opinion. That's Rio Dandy. Who it's all right. Ash, what's club? Ash is a Tottenham supporter. What's up, Van de Ven? Well done for staying up. Thanks. Okay, thank you, sir. Bye. London is always blue. That's Rio Dandy. Okay. To be honest, we wouldn't let you have him, but yes, we'll let you have Solanke, but that only worked for us. Okay. Oh, you guys are having an exchange on whether FC Bournemouth should let Senesi join Tottenham Hotspur. There's an experienced Premier League defender that is going to be a free agent in the summer. Who is that? Okay. Ash pleading her case says, although Senesi is a good player, more clubs would come for him. Yes, but I don't think these clubs would be clubs like Spurs. No offense. Okay, I reckon PSG considering they want him. They went for him. Oh, they are thinking, PSG are thinking that they would have gone for him instead of signing Ilya Zabadi. Well, I do not know. Who is a good player? Who is a good player, same level as Senesi? Van de Ven is better than Senesi, though. Okay, that's I can see you guys sharing good opinions. So, anyways, of course, constantly I'll digress into your comments and deviate from the main topics or stories because it is you guys that make this stream what it is. Through your love and support, through your time and your engagement. Okay, so for the Arsenal, they were crowned at Selhurst Park. Majority of those players got medals. I do not know if there's any Arsenal player that missed out on a medal. But I say well deserved. Well deserved to them. Over 38 games, they've been the better team. They've been the more consistent. They've lost only 5 games, which is the fewest losses. They've conceded a tally of 27 goals, which is the fewest. Still in the league, they've won the most games, which is 26. I think the most still in the league. So accumulated the most points at the end of the day. Most clean sheets, as many as 19. Most clean sheets in a row were 4. It was them. Most set piece goals, they scored 23, but 16 of them were headers. Then fewest shots conceded per game, and then the disciplinary record, which was tremendous. So you can see, I think, unless you have any bias towards them, but if you disabuse yourself of any bias towards them, you'll clearly understand or acknowledge that they have been the deserved champions and the best team in the league. Of course, I saw earlier on a tweet from somebody, a Manchester City fan. They wanted to make the argument that they had hoped that Man City win and then Arsenal lose, so that they finished within just a point behind Arsenal. I think because if Man City had won today, they would have finished at about 81 points, and if Arsenal had lost, they would have finished at 82 points. So, but in the end, it's a 7-point gap. So perhaps that is the tale of the season in one way or the other. Okay. Yes, but keep in mind, Senesi has been injured half the season. Okay, not Van de Ven, Van Hecke. Oh, John Van Hecke of Brighton and Hove Albion. That's the one you're talking about. Exactly. Okay, Raymond Kangumba says, I'm happy Arsenal are the winners of the Premier League trophy. Is for the Arsenal, happy for Arsenal fans and are winning Premier League. Okay, thank you so much, Raymond Kangumba. Senesi has been injured half the season. Okay, yes, probably more. So if he was playing, I would say even better, but it's close. Okay, I completely understand with the typos. If Arsenal win the Champions League, they are bigger than Chelsea. Hot take. That's a hot take. Now, I've said this without any fear of contradiction. In the last 25 years, or thereabouts, but I'll say in the last 25 years, Chelsea have been the best team in London, without a doubt, in my humble opinion, based on what they've won, based on how well they've competed. They've been just the best team from London. But when you take yourself through club profile, when you take yourself through their richness in history, their fan base, and some of the other things that may matter beyond just the accolades, I think Arsenal are the bigger team, in my humble opinion. Oftentimes, to cause Arsenal fans to lose the debate, Chelsea fans roll in the dice of, we have won the Champions League and you've not won. Obviously, they've won the Champions League twice. They've won the UEFA Europa League twice, once at the expense of even Arsenal. They've won more Premier League titles. I'm not talking about league titles. I'm talking about Premier League titles, because Chelsea have won 5 of them. Arsenal have won 4. So, by measure of that's where a lot of people stand to say, yeah, Chelsea is the, bigger team. No, they've won more than Arsenal. That's the honest bit in the last 25 years. But for me, I think, or I feel, when it comes to global appeal, and a few other things that you may want to consider. I find that Arsenal are the bigger team in London. But winning the Champions League would go so many miles in sort of cementing that place where I put them, because it's sort of the dark spot in their white sheet that they are left to remove. They are left to remove. So, okay, Mr. Devo says true. Okay, Raymond Kangumba, we've discussed the Ed Howe story multiple times, and I've told you what your club's verdict is when it comes to what's his name, Ed Howe. Chelsea are having a summer sale with no Europe. Well, I think that's Up the Villa 2026. Thank you so much, Up the Villa. Now, what is going to happen with Chelsea? I feel that first of all, they seem to be a club with unlimited resources when it comes to transfer spend. But without any form of European football, I feel that their summer plans could suffer a bit of a dent. They may need to rely more on sales to bring in new faces than they would be if they had achieved, let's say, Champions League football, because we know the sort of resources that come with having to play in the UEFA Champions League. Obviously, they'll have the resources because this season they played in the UEFA Champions League. But when you look at the virtue of the fact, by the virtue of where they finished in as far as the Premier League is concerned, in 10th place, and then being knocked out at the round of 16 in the UEFA Champions League, whereas it earns them some good money, they would have loved to do better, So they may need to look inward in terms of player sales to generate a bit more revenue to finance some incomings, with Xabi Alonso coming in to take charge. Okay, we got Europa getting up the cherries. Yeah, you got Europa League football, and that is a story. That's a headline story in its own. Sorry, just celebrating. I completely understand. First major competition. Garnacho or Rafael Leao? Rafael Leao any day. I do not know how you bring yourself to comparing the two, but Rafael Leao is miles better. Mr. Devo says Garnacho, in my opinion, Leao overrated, but he's still class. I do not think he's overrated. I would acknowledge or contend with somebody that says he's been a bit inconsistent, but I would choose him 10 times out of 10 over Alejandro Garnacho, in my humble opinion. Okay, have you got Europa League? No. Arsenal do not have Europa League. They won was it Cup Winners' Cup in 1994? Because in 2000, they lost was it UEFA Cup? Yeah, they lost the UEFA Cup on penalties against Galatasaray. So, yeah. Okay, Mr. Devo says, yeah, get in. You can win that, isn't it? You can win that. It isn't too hard. Okay. Beautiful trophy though, Europa League. Yeah. I think any piece of silverware is good when you win it. Yeah, I would say it's the best looking apart from the World Cup. You guys are now comparing trophies. Okay, it is what it is. So highlights are from Arsenal's day of crowning. 1, Josh Kroenke and his father, and those words that he said. And then Mikel Arteta reflecting on the journey, acknowledging, like any other human being, that there were moments of self-doubt, whether, times when he asked himself or questioned himself whether he was the right person to guide Arsenal to a major piece of silverware. When you finish second in 3 consecutive seasons, that point is bound to be there, where you ask yourself, maybe I brought them thus far and I'm not the one to get them over the finishing line. Maybe I'm Moses. I'm not the one going to get the Jews to the promised land, that sort of thing. You ought to ask yourself that question. So those moments of doubt come in here and there. They're bound to come in. So he reflected a bit of that. He gave credit to his wife in a different interview in regards to the place that she holds in sort of keeping him focused or staying in that space of self-belief that he can actually still do it. So it's really, really brilliant. It's really, really brilliant, you know? Then some of these players from Hell End, Max Dorman, Miles Lewis Kelly, Bukayo Saka, and then the entire team at large, especially those that have been part of the journey, where Arsenal have come second for 3 consecutive seasons. Then Declan Rice, that moment where he says it's not done at the Etihad Stadium after losing by 2-1 to Manchester City. So I watched those players celebrating their triumph and reflected back on some moments. But the day, I think those were some of my highlights of the day, based on what I've seen, based on what I've been able to gather. So many good things coming out today. But anyways, guys, we did come late, and it's 20 minutes past 1 a.m. here in Kampala, Uganda. So you'll allow me call it tonight after 1 hour and 21 minutes. So thank you so much, Mr. Devo. Thank you so much, Ash, for having been part of tonight's podcast. Up the Villa, thank you so much. Raymond Kangumba, always a pleasure to see you around. Rio Dandy, thank you so much. Mr. Lashgush, thank you so much. Then Reluctant Gamer, always a pleasure to see you around. Welsh or the Tractor Boy, thank you so much for having been part of tonight's podcast. Abdul Wahid, thank you so much for making the time, but also the cup of coffee. John Abiero, thank you so much. Rebellion, thank you so much. GFT, always a pleasure to see you around. Thank you so much, guys. Every single one of you for your active participation, for your time. That's what I value the most. The engagement, those that have newly subscribed to the channel, thank you so much. We'll be doing this tomorrow morning, by extension, to have an even better reflection of what's happened today. We'll have to go through some of the results that have transpired. We'll look at how the entire table looked at, looks like at the wrap up of the season, and that among other things in the morning for our morning broadcast that comes at 9 a.m. Otherwise, it's been a pleasure. You say thanks, congratulations on the title. Thank you so much, Mr. Devo. Always a pleasure. Have yourselves a blessed night, a blessed morning, a blessed evening, a blessed afternoon, depending on wherever it is that you have been joining us from around the world. It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye for now.